Some guys from Google. It's Google backed, and so there's obviously a very heavy bent towards tech. But the truth is, here in Austin, and we're going to get into this tonight, the truth is Austin's born and raised around enterprise technology. I think everybody here either works on it, touches it, knows somebody who does it, or deals with it every day. But the fact is that there is a huge groundswell and explosion of consumer packaged goods companies. And one of those companies is led by this young lady right here, Maggie Louise Callahan. And so we're going to talk about her journey. We're going to talk about why CPG, why chocolate, what's the challenge of doing something like that. But more importantly, we really want to learn the lessons that you've gone through so that these people, whoever wants to start a company or involved with a company, doesn't make the same mistakes. They can make their own mistakes.
Make new mistakes?
That's right. They can make their own. That's right.
That's good.
So with that, I know a little about your background, but I think it's always easier for you to tell somebody about your background. So can you tell a little bit about you and where you come from and what you're doing here now in Austin?
Sure. So, hi everyone, Maggie Louise Callahan. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Many of you know my background. Some of you have my background. I was a corporate lawyer for many years, almost a decade. I started out in New York City, moved to Washington, and then joined my husband in Denver, Colorado. And then eventually we landed here in Austin, which was a total surprise because it was for his work, but what a blessing. An amazing place to live, to raise a family, and to be inspired to start a business, especially a business where you make things like chocolate lipstick and chocolate brains. So I started Maggie Louise Confections about 6 years ago, and we manufacture, right at this stage, about 60,000 pieces of chocolate a week, hand-painted, creative confections, sell all over the U.S. and Canada. We're in, every Neiman Marcus, 110 Nordstrom. We ship all over, and we also do a lot of work for brands like Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Dropbox, Amazon, HBO, et cetera, et cetera. So, long story short, lawyer turned chocolatier, but not just chocolatier as a hobbyist, as a true business with scale and real opportunity ahead.
And why don't we start from the beginning? Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Washington, D.C., which was very unusual in the 70s because no one really lived there. But my parents had moved there. My father had been drafted in Vietnam, came back from the war, used the GI Bill to put himself through law school, and they moved to Capitol Hill in D.C., and he knocked on doors until he was hired as counsel for the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. They were there through the end of, until the Reagan administration, which that's how you transition out of D.C., is change of admin. And at that point, they moved to Indianapolis, which is where I spent my entire childhood and high school years. Beautiful, idyllic, neighborhood with mature trees, and you rode your bike everywhere.
That's nice. Mm-hmm. And so your father was a career politician and a lawyer?
He was an attorney, first and foremost. He built a great practice as a litigator. He also was in politics. When I was 10, he ran for U.S. Senate. He won the nomination but lost the election. I traveled to every county seat. I have two sisters, so we were active in the campaign just because it is a family affair, and sometimes taking your kids everywhere is easier than finding a babysitter. So it was a very interesting way to get to know a lot of people and see a different part of the state.
Excellent. And did his background as a lawyer guide you to become a lawyer yourself, or was that more self-driven?
Obviously, exposure to any career growing up influences how you think about it. So I was aware that he had a job that he found very intellectually engaging and that he liked doing. I worked in his office when I was 14. I would update the law library, because this is way back where you get a new page in the mail when there was something new happened, and you find the page and replace it. So I would do that. And so growing up, though, I was a hybrid. We all are, but I truly was a hybrid of my parents. My father is the lawyer, but my mom is a fine artist. And so I always had that analytical skill set, but I was very creative at the same time. When I graduated high school, my superlative was most likely to have an exhibit at the Met. I was really engaged in commercial art. I loved it. I thought that's what I wanted to do. And decided to actually pursue architecture as a career, but soon found out that architecture was a little more engineering driven. So while my husband would have liked it, I found that very dry, and decided at that point to pursue a career in law instead. And I think part of that was, a career in the creative arts is very, very tough. It is very hard to be successful. You struggle so much. And I also knew that, while my mom would go in a room and paint her feelings on canvas, that wasn't me. I liked the commercial art aspect a lot more. And I think in college I just felt more confident in those analytical skills and in the ability to have a successful career just through sheer hard work and determination.
Very good. Let's talk about the law career. So first, where did you go to law school?
I went to Harvard Law School.
Part of that, everybody? Is that one? Okay, very good. Double checking.
I was there the year that Legally Blonde came out, and it was so funny because it was really, truly an experience of when she's sitting around and everyone's talking about what they did that summer, and people are deworming orphans in, Ukraine, and she's like, well, I was at the pool, and it was just, there's a very serious crowd there. It was an interesting experience.
Did you find that particular scene credible?
Yeah, it was great. I
I love it. That's good.
Yeah, it was a wonderful movie.
Good. But not the second one.
The second one was great. I mean, I like the wardrobe. I always
Fair
look
enough.
for that, yeah.
Excellent. And so after Harvard Law, you went to a firm. And tell us a little about that journey. So you're all in on the law, you're doing legal work, you're in New York at this point, I believe?
Yes.
And how long are you in New York?
I was there about 5 years. So I joined a big firm in downtown Manhattan. I worked in structured finance. They were big deals, lots of money. It was interesting. I'm in my 20s. I wasn't married, didn't have kids, so working long hours and then having a lot of fun at the off time. That was a good setup for me. That all of my discretionary income went to buying clothes at Century 21, and it was good, but it was challenging and tough. But I liked the deal flow. I liked the thrill of working on deals, but the topic of them on their own just wasn't very engaging for me.
Did you extract any entrepreneur lessons from being at the law firm? Because law is typically the exact opposite of entrepreneurship. They're there to protect instead of entrepreneurs producing.
Yeah, I mean, you're there to tell everyone all the bad things that could happen and why you shouldn't do that. But there were a lot of really great lessons. I mean, first of all, client service. There's a lot of smart lawyers everywhere. So you need to not just be the best at answering questions, but also be the best at service and being responsive. And so I learned a lot about that. I also learned about being organized, managing projects. You just take that and you plug in some different type of project. So it was a very good way to learn professional skills that I've definitely taken in this other part of my career.
I ask this a lot because I work for a law firm, even though I'm not a lawyer. When you were there, have you ever met a happy attorney practicing?
Well, my father was very happy as an attorney. So, I saw that my whole life. And yeah, there were some people that were happy. And there were some people that weren't happy that I think were just not happy. They would be miserable doing, whatever. So you have to kind of separate that out. But I think some people really enjoyed it. I think other people didn't create options for themselves and maybe put themselves in a box where they had to work at a giant firm and didn't have the flexibility to pursue something else.
But you did have some flexibility. So what got you out of New York?
Well, I wanted to leave New York, but I wasn't ready to change. So I stayed with my firm and I moved to Washington, D.C. I'd gone to Virginia Tech undergrad, so I had a lot of friends there. It's a beautiful city. And I just kind of needed to get away from the crazy of New York. I was there for a year, and then Kevin, my husband who's here.
Wait, Kevin, say hello.
So Kevin and I had started dating when I was in law school, but we decided to split up when I moved to New York. He was just so upset, and but he moved to San Diego, and I moved to New York City, and we did our own thing for a number of years, and then around the time I was in DC, we decided to, grow up and get married, and so He had moved to Denver for his work, so I moved and joined him there.
Got it.
And it was there I joined a company based in San Francisco, and we worked in mergers and acquisitions. I thought maybe it wasn't the law, but it was the way I was practicing it.
Mm-hmm.
So leaving a big firm and going to a smaller company, growing a team. My role was kind of a hybrid of law and business development. I thought maybe that would be a good way to solve that itch I had to do something different.
And on the biz development side, because that's what I do, and I'm always very curious about this, did you find that brushing up on your sales skills and your relationship skills helped you in your current business?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to build a business, you have to be able to sell your products or find someone else who can do it for you.
Or in your case, they almost sell themselves, but I understand what you mean.
Well, thank you. But yeah, so that was very helpful. I had to grow a team, so that was a good experience too.
How many people?
When I started, I was the 4th employee.
Mm-hmm.
When I left, we were at 35.
Very impressive.
That was good.
And over how long? Period of time?
3.5 years.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So it was good to be in a rapidly scaling and growing company, figuring stuff out for the first time. It was interesting. But it wasn't mine. So a lot of the challenges I had there were, employee challenges, but not the same as owning that business and growing it at that rate. I wasn't thinking about cash flow, so it was totally different as far as what those challenges were.
A lot of entrepreneurs say that they're genetically unemployable. They can't be good employees if they're actual dyed-in-the-wool, true blue entrepreneurs. Did you find you bristled at having a boss? Because you hadn't done that from the beginning. You weren't a true blue entrepreneur up to that point yet, were you?
No, I wasn't, but no, I never bristled at having a boss. And I hate to break it to you, but even if you have your own business, you have a boss.
Everybody's your boss.
Your clients and your board of directors.
Staff.
Your
the
staff,
government.
yeah. There's no, I don't know, there might be 5 people on the planet who don't report to anyone. But in general, that doesn't go away. I think it's more if you can develop and find the value in that relationship, you'll be more successful as an entrepreneur.
And you did have a side hustle while you were there. You had a
Yes.
side business. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it's kind of unusual, but I'm a real big fan of antique glassware, and I would buy a lot of it, especially in Colorado, because there was just no one else was into it. Oddly enough, if you can believe it.
It's a shock.
So at a certain point, Kevin's like, "Listen, our house looks like a curio cabinet. This is not okay." And so I decided to build a business, to sell it. And I called it Bluebird Candy Dish Company, and it was antique candy dishes, and I paired it with candy. I didn't make the candy. I bought it from Hammond's, which was based in Denver. I built a website with Kevin's help. I did my first photo styling. I learned how to package and ship very delicate materials, which later was very helpful. But it was a total side hustle. It was before work and in the evenings, while other people were skiing in Vail. Kevin and I were wrapping up little tiny glassware dishes. So it was a labor of love for sure. And actually, a friend of mine bought it from me when we left Colorado.
Nice.
So I didn't, have to really say goodbye. But I've never looked at the website since, because she might not do something I agree with.
Yeah, so you don't want to look in the rear view, you're done.
Exactly.
Got it. I hear a lot of people, we all know everybody's moving to Austin. Austin is great, everybody loves Austin. The only people I ever hear moving out of Austin are going to Denver or Nashville. So you had the experience of Denver. Can you tell us a little about Denver from an entrepreneurial standpoint? I know you were doing corporate, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, it attracts a lot of really interesting people because of where it's located. It's a beautiful place to live. It can be very deceiving because it's very sunny, and then you go outside and it's negative 10 degrees. But it had a lot of energy when we were there. Kevin was working in health and fitness, which is big there. So it had a lot of, similar kind of momentum that Austin has. I just didn't think creatively it had the same vibrancy as here.
Not as weird as it is here.
Not as weird, but also, the food, the fashion, just the way people decorated their homes was just very different. Here it's a little more eclectic, a little more out there, more inspiring, in my opinion.
Makes sense. So what did bring you to Austin?
Again, Kevin's company. They were funded by Austin Ventures, which...
Can we say what it is?
Yeah.
Oh,
So it was Map My Fitness. It was a running app from way back when, an overnight success that took 10 years to build. So they brought us here, and I'd never even heard of Austin. And we got here, and it was like, wow, what a lottery win, because you could end up in Fargo, North Dakota when you move for work. So it was, quite an experience.
And that's been now 7 years.
Yeah,
How long have you been here?
it'll be 8 in December.
Wonderful. And you're settled here, you're happy here, Austin is home for now?
Yeah, we have 2 kids, so they're happy. That matters a great deal. We don't really have a lot of family here, so that's not great, but it's okay because people love to visit.
Certainly.
So this is it for long term.
It's a destination place.
Yeah, it is. Even my sister actually had her destination wedding here.
And this is the one that lives in Brooklyn.
Yeah,
And they're both in Brooklyn.
they're both in
Very
Brooklyn.
good.
Yes,
So you let them do their Brooklyn thing, you get to be here in Austin.
exactly.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So you're here in Austin, you're starting a business. At what point did you decide that it was time to do the transition from legal work? I know you went to culinary school. Tell us a little about that, if you don't mind.
Sure. So we got here, and we had, at that point, our daughter was 8 months old, and I had what you would probably describe as a really sweet gig for a new parent. I was doing work at the company that I knew really well. It was kind of easy, even though it was challenging. I could do it very simply. I was being paid well. I had a flexible schedule. It's kind of all the stuff on paper you'd want when you are a new mom. But I just wasn't very fulfilled. I wasn't very happy. And we got to Austin, and everyone was doing really cool stuff. And I thought, I want to do something cool too. I want to love my job. I don't want this to be it. I felt like I wasn't challenging myself. And, I saw Kevin go to work every day. It was stressful, it was hard, but he loved it. And I just thought, I think I should do that too. I also felt I was too talented, had too many skills to just be in a job I didn't enjoy. So left my company, retired from law, which meant I filled out the paperwork so I'd stop paying the Bar Association, and decided to go to culinary school. And one reason I went to school was to learn, obviously, but just to kind of reframe the way the world looked at me. Instead of being a lawyer that cooked on the side or made things, I could start to change the narrative around who I was professionally and turn myself into a professional, chef, or however I wanted to take that. It also gave me structure, so that if I'm going to school, I have to arrange childcare, which means I'm giving myself the time to really focus. And culinary school was very unusual. After an experience of growing up in a household where you argue about politics at the table, and then being a lawyer where everyone questions assumptions, culinary school was the complete opposite. It's very rigid. They tell you how to make everything, and that's what you need to do. A kitchen is a very strict hierarchy, and you don't question, you do what you're told.
Almost militaristic.
It's very militaristic. In fact, it's designed to be like that, a very clear pecking order. And for me, it knocked up against all of my background. And a lot of what they were telling us about how you do things, in my head and to the teacher, well, that's not science. I mean, that's just how they do it in France. We can do it however we want. And it was just a different perspective. I also had to wear a uniform, which I had told. Well, I did tell you when we spoke before that was really hard. After 37 years of dressing myself, having to wear the most unflattering uniform every day, and every night I'd have to iron my jacket. I wouldn't run errands after school. I'd have to go home and change because it was. I don't know, it was really hard to adjust to. It sounds so frivolous, but it really mattered.
No, but if you had an unstructured life and all of a sudden you're into deep, deep structure, I can imagine that would be really upsetting.
I was also the oldest person there. And so, a lot of the people that go to culinary school are right out of high school. So, I'd be like, why would someone just not clean up after themselves? It's just a very different mentality.
Was that because you were also a mom at the time?
I mean,
Partially?
probably not, because, I don't know. I still would assume everyone's going to take care of their own stuff.
No, we know.
It could be. I wasn't interested in being anyone else's mom, so that was clear. But it was a unique experience. But that's where I was able to learn a lot about dessert and pastry and food, break down a lot of what you do in that world. Things that seem so difficult, they're not. They just take a lot of practice. And when I went there, I knew I wanted to start a business, but I didn't know what. I had a quest to discover that. And it was while I was there, I discovered chocolate, which I knew as a consumer, like all of you, but I didn't know it was really a sculptural medium that you can shape and color and do all sorts of cool things with. And so that's where I got that exposure. And that sort of started my next chapter.
But right before that, I think you might have a little bit of a hiccup with a couple of internships.
I did try to do an internship because you're supposed to graduate. And yeah, I had an unpaid internship for 3 days where I was washing dishes, and I was like, I think I've learned everything I'm going to learn here. That's it. So for the lawyers in the room, you'll find it interesting. I went to this unpaid internship, and the woman who had hired me to not, to come in and do this, wanted me to sign a non-compete agreement. And I was like, well, obviously I'm going to compete. Like, I'm here to learn so I can go do something. And it's totally unenforceable, just so you know. So it was unusual because I think everybody else there had signed it, without thinking about it. But
Probably very few lawyers in class.
Yeah. I was just really surprised at it. It seemed very constricting in in an industry that can be, very hard and low paying, that you'd limit it further for someone's career objectives. The lawyer in me, I guess, was saying that.
So you obviously didn't sign that. You left after 3 days. From when you left culinary school to the day you actually incorporated and started the business, how long was that? How long did you decide, it's ready, I want to do chocolate, I want to do Maggie Louise? Can you tell us about that decision?
Yeah, it was about 3 or 4 months. I've been doing, during school, I'd had a lot of people interested in what I was doing, because who doesn't, daydream about leaving their corporate job and doing something creative? It's easy to romanticize that. It's kind of like your quintessential Hallmark movie. And so people were interested, and I was blogging back then, because that was a new thing, doing photo styling with what I was learning. And so I knew that I kind of had an audience, and that once I would have a product, I think people would want to buy it. So I started developing product. I would take it to my husband's office and solicit opinions. And they were all really positive. I don't know if it was real or if they were just being nice to Kevin. But
both.
yeah. But I just figured I got to put myself out there and do this. So I found a kitchen in East Austin. I cooked at night from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And then during the day I built my business. And so I think it was a good lesson for me. It was hard physically, those hours, but it meant I wasn't spending peak time on product. I was spending it on building and selling.
Making relationships happen.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And so from that, you knew it was a hit, you knew people liked it, you knew you could sell it. Tell us about your first sale. I'm very curious about this. It's usually the turning point for a business. You actually got somebody who wasn't personally related to you to buy your product.
So not like a friend of my mom's,
Right,
but
exactly.
yeah.
Not friends and family, just a little bit beyond that.
Yeah, and there's always that first sale, even now, when we do a new design and someone who I don't know buys it. It's like the most exciting thing to happen. But I think in that first year, we had two big corporate projects where people reached out who I didn't know and wanted to give us a lot of money to make chocolate for them to represent their brand. So we did a project for John Frieda Hair Care. They wanted to tell a story of brunettes being spicy. So we made spicy chocolate that said Brilliant Brunette in chocolate letters. And they did a press mailing with it. And then I also did a project for the island of Anguilla. So 2 totally random places that wanted to hire us to make something for them.
And it sounds very random. How did they find you?
Instagram.
Instagram. So Instagram at the time was very hot. It wasn't as hot as it is now, but obviously it was very new.
It was really new.
But it worked, clearly.
It did, and we were showing up on Instagram. I didn't even have my own account. We had to make an account because people wanted to tag us. And at that point, I hired a PR firm in New York, and and we started sending out chocolate boxes to people, unsolicited, but who, like Rebecca Minkoff, for example, she's a fashion designer, had a really great following, and so she got a box and thought it was cute. She put it on her Instagram. So there was no influencer. You didn't pay or anything.
Not the
They
time.
were, yeah. So it became this very organic way of meeting people, and then they look us up and hire us.
I mean, and you also benefit from the fact that you are very visual. I think that without tasting the actual chocolate, which is excellent, seeing it really is believing it. So it was a perfect fit for Instagram at the time, I would imagine.
Yeah, and that's completely random. I mean, that was purely because I made stuff that I liked and I thought was beautiful, and I liked it being in a plain white box, and I liked photographing it on white paper, so it would be like a museum wall, a blank canvas. And it just happened to be that somebody with their phone could take a nice picture. And that wasn't planned. And that's, I think, where you have those great accidents of entrepreneurship that are really valuable, but you can't be too calculating.
Sure.
Because it was an authentic, organic creation of the product that was at the right time.
Makes sense.
People had started shopping visually. Before, it was purely shopping in person, looking at the product, tasting it, but here it was being able to buy something based on the way it looked only.
From this conversation right now, it sounds like your business is launching, it's on grease rails, everything's wonderful. Can you tell us of an instance? Well, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Can you tell us as an instance of something that you may have invested in too heavily or made a wrong choice or a bad decision based on knowledge you didn't have at the time?
Of course. I have my top 100 stories like that. Okay, so yeah, there was a lot of all-nighters. I mean, if I thought I worked a lot of hours as a lawyer, this was nothing. I mean, I was working crazy hours, but I was also then, after all the work, mopping the floor, scraping chocolate off of the floor, everything. So our first year, we got contacted by Sanrio, which is the owner of Hello Kitty, to make custom Hello Kitty chocolates for the Kitty Conference, which was celebrating Hello Kitty's birthday. And I thought it was amazing. It was going to be $20,000.
That's an automatic yes, right?
Yeah.
Except for?
That was like 6 months of like paying people. So we developed a beautiful product, custom Hello Kitty faces and bows. But the fact is that it was more production than we could handle. And when I say we, it's me and like 2 other people. Our equipment broke, our backup equipment broke, and at a certain point, the math didn't work. Like 24 hours a day, X amount per hour, like we could not get to where we needed. So I was only able to fulfill half the order, and it wasn't the client experience I was looking for. I wanted them to have a better experience working with us. So for me, it was a really great lesson. Until that point, I always thought you can, like, if you dream it, you can do it, you can make it work, but sometimes you actually can't, and so you can't overpromise.
I imagine that was a hard lesson learned, that you made an order, you got paid for it, you didn't deliver but half of it. Did that make you gun shy about doing other corporate orders in the future?
No, it made me a little smarter. When we didn't do the order as the level I would like, I felt very embarrassed. I wasn't used to delivering for anyone, anything in any part of my career, something less than perfect. So I think it made me smarter about what we could do, but not too smart, because we've still continued to push ourselves. You can go the opposite extreme and be so worried about something happening that you don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned a lesson that I was able to take with me, but I don't think it really made me too worried about taking on ambitious projects in the future.
So let's talk about that. To date, what's the most ambitious project you've taken on so far? Outside of that one, of course.
You mean just client project or business project?
Actually, both. Client project would be probably a good way to start, but I'd love to know the business project as well, your expansion.
So it's interesting. I mean, obviously, as a manufacturing company, what was ambitious 5 years ago is nothing now. So there's one big client that we've done their holiday gifting for every year, 1,000 boxes, big boxes. And every year, we've gotten them done earlier and earlier, which is great. But big, I think our largest order has been, at one time, like $100,000. which is a lot of chocolate.
It's a lot of chocolate.
It's a lot of chocolate and paper and design, all of that stuff.
And wrapping and everything else.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of people there.
Yeah.
So full disclosure, I got to take a tour of the facility yesterday, and it's really a lot of fun. And it definitely does smell like Willy Wonka, and the people are very happy and they're working hard, but it was a lot of fun to watch. But to see the process, 44 people right now, is that what I heard?
That's right, yeah.
From 3,
Yes.
5, 6 years ago? Not even.
Yeah.
It's a really an enterprise. It's really interesting to watch, but you can see that working. If you had $100,000 worth of chocolate to produce, you've got to get all those people absolutely in line, in order, doing what they're supposed to be doing consistently. And I imagine that's pretty tough.
It's tough because you're doing that order alongside 100 other orders. So you don't stop everything to take on the big project. You have to weave it in, and you have to bring more people in if you need to. It's a lot of planning and a lot of operational efficiencies. And so, just it can be almost overwhelming at times to think of all the components. But then once you get that down and you start to see it as a machine that runs, it's pretty amazing.
Were you surprised by how much logistics are involved with making chocolate?
Yes. I mean, honestly, I had no idea that I was basically starting a paper company. We own so much paper as in the form of boxes and collateral and everything. We have a print shop. I mean, all of these areas that I never even thought of that are integral to what we create. I mean, we are a shipping company, it's pretty
With a
intense.
temperamental product.
With a product that melts. So the good thing about it, I will say, is that the worst thing that happens is that it melts. It doesn't look good. It's not like, oysters that kill someone.
Right.
So, but it's just so many logistical nightmares. And then even the way that we manufacture it by hand painting, it's just so many steps. It's so intricate.
Can we talk about it just briefly? Everybody can see the chocolate. I imagine everybody's had some of the chocolate in the past. Can you talk about just the very brief process of how you come up with an idea and get it out the door from start to finish?
Sure. So you'll start with a story or a concept, usually centered around a moment. Like we have Thanksgiving coming up. Okay, so you think that's a great time to buy chocolate. Let's do something for Thanksgiving. What does that storyline look like? What's Friendsgiving like? People gathered around a table. You've got this color palette for the fall. You start telling that story. And then either we create shapes, we manufacture the molds and the tooling to fit that storytelling. So lattes, we do that are great for telling a sweater weather story. Or we find molds in Europe. We create painting techniques to emulate what a gourd might look like, or Indian corn that's on the table, and then start to put it all together. Iterate, do work on the pieces, probably do 20 rounds of development until it's final. And then it goes through costing. See, then it gets really fun because I just described the creative process, but that's the first step. The next step is, does it meet our gross margin requirements? And those are the parts of the business that have taken 5 to 6 years to build.
And when you're dealing with that, obviously there's your fixed cost, the boxes, the covers, the bags, the bows, those are easy. The variable costs obviously are going to change by individual painting and individual printing on the box itself. When you say costing, are there items or things that you stop doing because of costing? Do you have to throw stuff out of the creative process?
Yes.
Does that hurt? Is that painful sometimes?
Yes, but I can negotiate, and I do all the time with our finance team, because I can say, okay, we're going to make this really intricate piece here. It's going to have 17 colors, but we're going to mix it with things that are really simple, and we can balance it out. Or I could charge more for it, or I try to negotiate my way to making it happen.
I saw a Christmas tree chocolate there yesterday, and it's gorgeous. It's a green Christmas tree. It's about this size, but they're individually hand-painted ornaments. That must have taken a lot of time and effort, back and forth with costing.
Well, I want you to think it took a lot of time and effort.
It looked great.
Yeah, so that's the other thing, is sometimes by creating the mold in a certain way, you're able to make it a lot easier. So we used to do a lot of freehand painting when I started, where you're painting designs into different shapes. But when you add more people, the way they paint looks different every time. So you create molds that have some more tracing elements on them, so it's more consistent.
How long did it take you to learn that?
Probably 3 years.
Okay.
I mean, you see the impact of like having different people doing different things, and you say, how do we have one product all the time that looks the same, even though it's creative?
Right, but consistency counts, especially if you're doing volume.
Exactly.
Makes sense. And can we talk about that? Your mix between your corporate, your wholesale, you've got retail, and obviously direct. Can we talk about how that mixes up?
Sure. So I didn't endeavor to like create the most complex business, but I ended up doing so because not only do we have so many SKUs as a retail company, but we sell in 4 different channels, and we always have. We sell in wholesale, we sell in corporate, we sell online, and we sell in our brick and mortar store on East 6th Street. And so what that has meant is that we've had to build 4 different sales organizations within the company, 4 different margins, 4 different ways of delivering product to consumers. Those are all the work that goes into it. But on the plus side, diversification of revenue is amazing, because if something is not working, maybe something else is going to work better. You can balance out the risk in that sense. As a consumer-facing company, it means that we have so many ways to get in front of customers. We can get in front of them through a corporate gift, because every corporate gift has our name on it. So when Amazon hires us to do 500 boxes to go promote their newest show, that goes to 500 people who are most likely in our target market, because they're paying $50 a box. And so all of those people that we didn't know now have received our product and tasted it and tried it.
And see what you can do for them.
Or they say, this is amazing, I gotta check them out, I'm gonna buy my Christmas gifts from them.
Have you, and just not to belabor that point, have you ever done any kind of gift bags for award shows or things like that?
No,
I'm sure you've been
really.
approached.
The first thing about starting a business is that people would love for you to give your product away.
People die of exposure every day.
Yeah, and we do a lot of that, but more in the philanthropy side. Early on, I just decided, with some talking to other people who had the experience, that you can get lost in that type of gift bag, unless you're on the table in the middle of the plate. You're just part of a giant bag of other things. So we get approached all the time, but I prefer to put those efforts into giving back. That sounds so wonderful, but it's also just,
it's good business.
It's good business. It's good for the community.
Yeah, it's surprising how many startups and small businesses, and especially food businesses, get asked to give away things for free all the time. And it's almost like startup people know that you want to get out there, you want to build awareness, but at the same time, you've got to eat as well.
Yeah, and I think if you price it, you're less likely to kind of fall into a bad trap.
It's a good lesson.
If you think of the cost of it, the true cost.
And you recently got into wholesale. It's been a little bit of time now you've been doing that. How has that grown? How has that expanded? Who are the wholesale customers? Not by name, just by category.
So we're not typical CPG. We're more in premium specialty, like a department store like Neiman, Nordstrom. Neiman Marcus had come to us a few years ago, and we said no again. And then finally we said yes, doing 1 box for them for Christmas. And we weren't saying no because we were too cool. We just didn't have the capacity to do it. Again, Hello Kitty taught me that. So 2 years ago, we developed a box for them that was in their catalog that sold really well. And so then we started developing a lot more for them, and now we work with them year-round. Nordstrom as well, Bloomingdale's, so businesses like that. And then also we have a boutique wholesale business around the country.
And do you find that those large companies depress your margins, or do they really work with you to figure out how to get a price appropriate so that you can make money and they can make money?
I mean, first of all, if you can't make money, then
why do?
They don't want you to just go out of business, or what's the point, Right. They're investing in the brand.
Walmart's been notorious for that for many years, that's why I ask.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Different
for us, we've always been focused more on partnership And the woman who's in charge of our wholesale team is really good at partnership. What that means is that you're not aiming to get that first sale. What you want is like 50 years of sales ahead. So if the pricing and the margins aren't right from the beginning and you can't grow a healthy business based on them, you're not gonna, they're gonna build you up, they're gonna put you in their catalog, and then you won't be around here later.
Right, you can't make up your volume if you're losing money.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
And so you have to also work with them. I'll do a lot of in-store events for them, other ways to kind of help them sell the product. But we were able to get into these great retailers in part because we already had a following on social media, we already had a book of clients, so they didn't have to sell us as much as they might somebody totally brand new.
You also had some retail experience yourself. You knew how to display things, you knew how to show things, and I imagine you could bring that to the table as well.
Yes, and I worked at Nordstrom in high school, so I was very well versed in how valuable that client is. And so that client sees us there, and they could become also a client in our e-com channel, in our corporate channel. It's just another way to get exposure, but you do have to make sure it has value for the bottom line at the same time.
And you've had your retail store for how long now?
It will be 5 years in February.
So you started pretty early on.
Yes and no. We were about a year and a half in. We were one of Oprah's favorite things in our first year. So this was after that. It was after we kind of felt like we had established that there's something here. We have clients. We're going to open a store, but it's going to be the front of our kitchen. So this rent payment, it doesn't have to be supported by only like a brick and mortar store.
Right. The one thing I've always hated about retail, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, you can't open 30 days a week. You can't be open all the time, 24 hours a day. You're paying 30 days a week, 30 days a month for your space, but you can't be open that much time. And you're affected by the weather.
Right.
So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we're affected by not just like rain or weather like this, but it's really hot. Chocolate has peak moments. So I didn't want to have a storefront where I felt like we lived or died based on if it was raining on a Saturday. That's a lot of pressure. And it's one thing to have that if you already have like a very nice foundation built for the business. It takes that pressure off, and then you can do stuff that's good and creative and try things. So now our store, it's there. It's both for people who come into town and know us, and they come by. We meet with corporate clients there. We do have walk-in traffic. It's on East 6th Street, which has been changing a lot. We got in there pretty early, so it's been a valuable place for us.
Yeah, that really has grown up around you. And we've got new residential, we've got a lot of new retail coming in. We'll have Whole Foods there shortly.
I know. It's pretty great to see because we have a parking garage.
Oh, that's
so,
great.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of thing as a retailer, though. If we didn't have a parking garage that we validated, we couldn't have any customers come by because there's so much traffic there now.
That's right.
So small things like that, again, not planned, just happen to be the way it worked out. Yeah.
Wonderful. And do you plan on expanding retail?
I'd really like to because I love being able to showcase the product. I love that people can buy something last minute, impulse buy, discover us, experience it more than just with one sense, but many of them. It's tough because you're committing a lot. I'm not shy of commitment, but it's nice, like with e-com, you could dial it up, dial it down, decide how much you're going to spend and pull back if you're not seeing what you need. But when you do brick and mortar, you're committing, and you're mostly, though, committing to the ability to staff it, not just with like a sales associate, but with leadership, people that will drive business into the store, marketing, and that's not necessarily easy to find.
Especially if it's not here.
Right.
Because if you were going to do it, you'd probably do it in other places in the country.
Exactly. So it'd be a little bit loss of control on my end.
Doesn't sound like that's your thing.
It's not, but I'm rational enough to know that there's value there. So it's about finding the right partner who I would feel like could really own that and lead that. It can't be me. I have an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old. I need to be here in Austin. And a husband. Oh, that's right.
Him.
And a whole team here. So I need to be here.
Well, very good.
Yeah.
And as far as, so expansion plans on retail are based on what you feel is going to be right. Obviously, wholesale and e-com are going to be a lot more are hopefully going to be bigger as you grow over time. What's next for Maggie Louise? What's the next big step?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, in a small term, it's Christmas. I mean, our fourth quarter, we do more than half of our year. So that's
what I call Black Friday.
Yeah, exactly. But that's for us, it's so critical.
And what are your other days? I imagine Mother's Day, Valentine's.
Mother's Day is very big, Valentine's Day. We also do things that not a lot of other chocolate companies do, like we do Chinese New Year, we do Diwali, we do all sorts of different
That's
holidays.
That's a fairly new thing for you, Diwali. You did 2 years in a row now?
Yeah, and so
I've seen it, they're great.
Thank
Really
you,
cool.
thank you. But there's a market out there for more than just your traditional Hallmark holidays. And we can try to capitalize on that.
And most chocolate companies, let's face it, they make their money on Halloween. That's not what your business is.
No, we do some Halloween, but it's mainly,
Incidental.
yeah, like we're not like a high volume. You're buying it as a gift or to treat yourself. It's not like you wouldn't give it, maybe someone would give it out for Halloween, but not
You can only hope.
Yeah, exactly. So Halloween is fun for us, and we do some clever things, and we get to have some really creative ideas. We did eyeballs this year, but it's not the same as Hershey's,
Right.
where that's their big volume holiday.
Sure. And they do about 50% of their market that day.
Yeah.
That weekend, whatever that might be. Interesting. So that I got off topic and I apologize.
That's
What's the
okay.
next big thing?
All right, so I live in this world where I have to focus on the rest of the quarter, but also the next year ahead at the same time. And so we're going to continue to expand our wholesale business. We've just seen a lot of success with it. We're doing some fun things, like we're going to be doing all the chocolate for the Kentucky Derby,
Wow.
like licensed to do that. We've never done licensing before.
Can you talk about what that entails?
So that means that we will be the official chocolatier of the Derby, with using their mark and their icon and selling at Churchill Downs and selling in Louisville and around the country, but it still has our name on it. And so anyone going into this kind of business, I definitely advise, like, put your name on everything. Otherwise, the value isn't really there unless you're purely trying to drive volume. Do that maybe once you have the capacity, but don't do a lot of private label early on, or you won't get that organic marketing. So growth in that wholesale channel, I see a lot of. E-com just continues to grow, but it's a very volatile area right now. I'm sure a lot of you work in fields related to e-com, and you see that the digital marketing has just had a lot of changes in the past year or two. Cost of acquisition has gone up. So that's why, again, multi-channel helps to balance that out.
Makes sense.
It does. For my near term, I'm hosting an event at Herald Square in New York in December. So I hope I don't get mowed down by 13-year-olds. But doing an event at the new Nordstrom and at the new Neiman's in New York, and then growing our relationship with those companies.
Tremendous.
Just adding more to our client. They want to have more convenience with us. So e-com's awesome, especially if you're sending gifts to somebody else. But if you need something last minute, it's slow. So putting ourselves where our clients are
Makes sense.
is on the agenda for 2020.
Very good. It sounds like those big brands in New York are calling you, and you're doing a lot of partnerships, a lot more activity and activations with them. That makes a lot of sense.
Right, and also, still on the business side, driving to our goals as far as gross margin go and profitability. Because there's all the outward-facing exciting things, but at the same time, we're building a business to make our board happy, our investors happy, myself happy, create this wonderful product, but also build a healthy, thriving, growing business.
Very good. So before we get to Q&A, because I want to make sure that we all have enough time to ask questions, biggest lesson learned, or more importantly, the most surprising thing you've learned?
Biggest lesson learned. Don't work with your husband. Just kidding. Kevin and I worked together for many years, and it was great. We had a great time working together. We have very different skill sets, so it was a nice compliment. But it can be very hard from a family perspective, because you feel stressed at the same time. So if I'm crazy busy at the holidays, now it's nice if Kevin is just going about his work and working hard, but we're not in the same lifeboat, if you will.
Sure.
But I've learned so many lessons. Scaling takes time. You have to be patient. You have to move so fast, but also be slow at the same time. You can't overcommit. So every day is a lesson, because once you learn something, there's just a new one out there. It doesn't, there's no end point for anyone. Biggest surprises, I would say, I don't know, just how much I've enjoyed building the company. I love the product and I love creating it, but I also enjoy the business side of it too. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Of course.
This is great. Question time. I'm sure you've got a ton of them. I've got more if you want. Before you start, excuse me, because we're such an intimate group, you say your name and the company you're with.
Hi, I'm Allison. I work at JP Morgan. You mentioned your board a couple times, so I'm wondering how you met the people you have on your board, why you chose them, and why they work well with you.
Of course. So at a certain point, we raised money, like a lot of companies do, and with that, we also established a board of directors, most of whom have a stake in the company, but also have operating experience, diversity of backgrounds, and it's small, 5 people, so it's manageable. But it's a great way to just instill some formalized governance, and also think big picture at the same time you're running the business, because it can be really easy to just work every day on that day. But by having like a larger group that you are also working with and talking to, who want to see the long road, it keeps you focused on both at the same time.
As a follow-up to that, I'm very curious, and we need to know who is on the board, but what's your biggest board challenge? Where do you find the conflict? There's always conflict with everybody, but what do you guys bash heads over?
Nothing.
Good. I don't believe you, but I think it's a good statement.
Yeah, no, I mean, everyone always has different ideas. So I do think it takes a lot of time. It takes more time than I realized to manage it, that side of it. I hadn't really kind of parsed that into my responsibilities, but it's a major part of what I do every day.
So board management does seep into your day-to-day.
Yeah, communication and all of that. It's not every day, but sometimes it is.
But that's a great lesson for startups to know. If you have a board, you're responsible to them, and communication is absolutely critical, and sometimes they are demanding, and you're busy juggling chainsaws every day, and they throw another chainsaw in there.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's usually very helpful.
Sure.
By the time you're like, that's another chainsaw.
Yeah.
You know, so perspective.
Makes sense. Anybody else? Yes.
My name is Amy Illoy. I work at a law firm called Wilson Sonsini. My question is, as a lawyer, how do you feel interacting with lawyers?
That's a really good question. I mean, first of all, I never want to be the lawyer in the room. Like, I hire out everything. So I'll like look at our contracts, for example, but that's purely like business to me. But I hire, like we work with Kastner here, you know, on all of our corporate matters. When we've done our leases, I've hired outside counsel. Like, you know enough to know that like someone who is an expert needs to step in. I definitely don't see it as a way to save money, which would be acting as our lawyer in-house. And then also for my own protection, I don't want to make decisions and be giving advice to the company. I'm not even licensed anymore in Texas law, so I know too much to know that I shouldn't do that. And then two, people assume because you have a legal background that you know everything. And I worked in, you know, M&A and finance, so a commercial lease, like, that's definitely not my field. So I like working with outside counsel, but I do have high standards because I know that like they can do it. Like if we need it quickly, like we can make it happen. But I also like to be a good client because I had some clients that were hard to work with. It didn't make it more successful when they were really difficult. So I learned that lesson and try to be helpful, you know, as far as planning and not doing fire drills at the last minute.
It's gotta be tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's all relative because, you know, the reason that you need help sometimes is because those fire drills are actually real. So it's all about balance.
Very true. Anybody else?
Question. So it sounds like it's.
Got to play by the rules.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sherry Warner and Koya Innovations. But it sounds like as the company has grown, you've kind of gotten further away from the creative and the hands-on and more into the business. So which of the two do you enjoy the most? Feel like when it was small and you were more involved and at the creative part, or growing the business?
So it's a good question because it's one that I struggle with personally. I'm still our creative director and I lead our product development team. I have never thought that I needed to have a monopoly on our ideas or our creative. We get the most interesting products if we have a mix of viewpoints going into it. So bringing other people into that, I've always been really open to. As long as I'm still tough on the standards, but I don't get to work on it all the time. Instead, for me, I get to bounce between the two, and when I'm feeling like a little burnt out from the business side, I can work on some product development, and that can recharge my batteries, and vice versa. The creative work is exhausting. I know that for a lot of people, you probably think it's just really fun, but it's exhausting. You know, you work on it over and over in your mind. You can't turn it off. And so to go from that to kind of a more black and white project that has an answer, because with creative, you can always improve. You can keep improving, you know, forever. So I try to look at it more as like one can fulfill the other versus, you know, am I moving towards one and not the other? And I think also a lot of the business things for us have had creative solutions. So much like when I was a lawyer, there's a creative side to that thinking process. Even though it's not creating a material object, it still is interesting in that way.
And putting the puzzle together.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Shay Ball. I work at GenWise here in Austin. My question is, do you find any similarities between your leadership style as a parent and your leadership style within your business organization?
That's a very interesting question. I in some ways, I would not want people on my team to think of me as their mother,
Right.
because I'm not. And I think for women it can be tough because people are surprised when their mom is, you know, upset with them or doesn't give some critical feedback. And so I have to work hard to not have that image. You know, like I don't make cookies and bring them to work. I think it's a hard balance because a lot of people perceive that as you're the matronly figure. I would say though, being a parent definitely makes me a better leader and a better, boss, because you learn a lot of patience. You learn that people are really different, no matter, we have 2 kids and they're totally different, even though they're in the same situation. So I think you become more open-minded in that respect. And I think it gives you perspective, where you're like, this is not important. It kind of helps you draw those lines.
Jeff Knight, Cold Bridge Advisors. Quick question for you about product sourcing. So as you're building your chocolates, great business by the way, you need a taste tester.
Thank you.
How do you go about finding the right sources for like your chocolate and your sweeteners, whatever else, and then also just all the packaging?
Yeah, so with chocolate, it has a pretty long and not so wonderful past. So we're very lucky now because there's sustainable chocolate that's readily available. And so I knew, of course, I wanted to use something that was responsibly sourced and that was from Latin America, just from a supply chain management perspective. I had tried some different chocolates out in the world, but when you're looking for chocolate to make in large scale, you're not just thinking about the taste, you're thinking also, can you deliver? We worked with a company for many years that was based in Venezuela, and I really love their chocolate, but at a certain point, it was like, I can't have faith that you will be able to give us our order, you know? So the sourcing was about what kind of companies do we want to work with, what kind of chocolate do we think tastes really good, because everyone has a different flavor profile, so we needed to decide what ours would be. But then we've always had a very classic flavor palette, nothing that's like too out there. So you had pizza from East Side Pies, but we won't make a pizza flavored chocolate. You know, I like classic candy. I like Reese's peanut butter cups. I like all these kid candies that I had. I just wanted to elevate them for our more advanced palate. And so when we looked at ingredients and methodologies, that was what I was doing. And I was making initially a lot of ganaches, which are with fresh cream, which is wonderful, but it has no shelf life. So we had to extend our shelf life. And instead of adding preservatives to those types of things, we just created different flavors and fillings that had a shelf life naturally, because sugar is a stabilizer, without adding preservatives in.
It's so important for your business. How long is a typical box of chocolate shelf life?
It's about 9 months.
It's pretty good.
It's good, yeah, just because chocolate has no water in it. And again, sugar is the enemy of everything. Not everything, but
Right.
when it comes to shelf stability. So, you know, that was something that we had to like work towards and solve before we could expand wholesale, for example. And even when I was starting this, I wanted to do something with shelf stability. I always enjoyed making bread when I was in school, but you need to make bread fresh and hot for people to have at breakfast. Whereas with chocolate, you can plan the production of it and have a business week schedule. And so I even knew I didn't want to work in restaurant because I didn't want to be at work when my family was not. But ingredient sourcing is really critical because people want to know where their food comes from, as they should know. And we want to support companies and growers that are doing the right things for our environment. We pay a lot for our chocolate, and in part it's because they produce it in a way that will keep on producing for years ahead. I actually got to go to Ecuador last year and go right to the beginning of the supply chain to see the cacao pods. I met the farmers. I saw the whole process. People that I spoke to and worked with were very happy and took a lot of pride in their work, which made me feel very good about the companies we were working with. But it's chocolate, so it also comes down to taste, and so it has to taste good.
Anybody else?
Can you talk a little bit about your decision to raise capital and how you went about finding your investors and how you work with them today?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely like growing manufacturing is capital intensive, especially because for a lot of CPG you can use a co-packer or somebody else to manufacture for you. Our product is so distinct and we created it that there isn't someone we could hire to do it.
Nobody should trust them.
No, I wouldn't. No, and they're not going to develop it in a way like it wasn't even an option ever. So we had to raise capital a few years in. We did our first seed round. Just my husband and I just put money in, and then eventually did a convertible note. And we had to just network and really get to know the community, work with different angel investors in town. But it really was, hundreds of hours of coffees and lunches and events and introductions. It's just a lot of, it's like sales, but you're selling your vision and your ability to execute on it. So we did a convertible round, and then we did an equity round, and then we did another round after that. Raising money is really hard. Anyone that says otherwise is just not telling you the truth. It takes a lot of time, and it can be very distracting for your business, except for the fact that for me, it kept me looking forward. Again, kept me out of the kitchen if I need to be focused on what's our 5-year plan. But it's very stressful because you are also making all these plans that you can't execute on until you finalize your fundraising, and you can't control everything with your fundraising. and it takes twice as long as everyone says it will. So definitely wouldn't take it lightly. There's other resources out there for capital, a little bit, like small business loans, that sort of thing. But there's not a lot of private capital available for a young company, especially when you're starting out and you haven't been able to prove yourself yet. So it's a really tough area, especially for women or minorities. We all know the statistics, 2% women are funded businesses. So it's finding people who have faith in what you're doing, and also have enough money to take risk with it, so they can do something that might not work, because you're putting something out there that is not, it might fail. So it's another job. It's like but there are support areas in Austin that can help, and there's people you can talk to. I think sometimes, again, you can read Inc. magazine or Forbes and think, wow, it's so easy for everyone. Why is it so hard for me? It's because you're not getting the real story.
If you're in a magazine, it's typically the polished story.
Yeah, that's why I like how I built this, because they'll tell you the real stuff. Yeah, it's like they have their bookends, so they're in a position to tell you like the bad stuff. They're not trying to sell their vision. So yeah, you hear that and you think, oh, how could, I don't know, any of the brands, I'm not even thinking of how could they have had that? They seem to be so successful. But in reality, every company struggles. Our main competitor filed for bankruptcy this year. I was shocked. I thought they were doing everything right, and it was so easy for them. So you never know.
Very good. Maybe one more?
What are you most looking forward to?
In life or with the business?
What's the difference?
Well, let's see. I am looking forward to hitting all of our goals for the fourth quarter, because we worked really, really hard this year. We turned around our entire operations and manufacturing process. Last year was tough. We scaled up so fast, it was not right. We just made it work, we got it done, and that's not the same as methodical, calculated, purposeful. So we lined all these things up. I'm looking forward to seeing them come together. Still solving problems along the way, but we've been in such a stay up all night, just get it done mode, that this is a very different world. I look forward to these beautiful cold temperatures, because we can ship ground and it's so much cheaper, and chocolate doesn't melt. And I look forward to Christmas Day, because this quarter will be done. I can spend it with my family and know that I can have a little downtime after that. And every day I look forward to going to yoga or reading or something to manage stress. Yeah.
Well, unless anybody has anything else, thank you very, very much for joining us. This has been wonderful. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you.